Welcome into the first post-trade deadline edition of Daily Faceoff Live. It's March 10th. We're streaming live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube, and the show is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Tyler Yaremchuk, and I hope a rested Frank Seravalli after that weekend.
Kind of rested, just I would call it recovering. I'm in the recovery phase. It's going to take a few days.
That's fair. That is fair. It was a busy week for you. Obviously, a busy deadline day as well. We will talk about some of the fallout from deadline day in a little bit. Stephen Ellis is going to pop by for the big segment to tell us a little bit more about some of the prospects that were moved at the trade deadline. But first, Frank, let's start with our nightcap. It's brought to you by JP Wiser's, proud to be the official whiskey of the NHL, offering Canadian hockey fans a premium drink choice to enhance every game night experience across the country. JP Wiser's, the official whiskey of game night. And let's start with the other big headline around the league outside of trade deadline stuff. Alex Ovechkin inching closer and closer, now 9 goals away from number 99. He is scoring at a 56 goal pace this season. Absolutely insane. But here's an interesting little wrinkle in all this, Frank, and it's been talked about a bit, but honestly, not as much as I think it should be. He can maybe do it in fewer games than Wayne did. He is 13 games away from tying Wayne Gretzky in games played. So my question for you, he's 9 goals away. Can he do it in 12 games and set the record in fewer games than Wayne Gretzky?
Unequivocally, yes. He will do it. There's at least one hat trick left in him on this chase. And now that we're down to single digits, the great chase is only 8 away from tying. Can he do it in fewer than 13 games? I think he can. So this month of March is going to be unbelievable. We've got 4 nations right into trade deadline, and then the great chase followed by the playoffs. If you're the NHL, you couldn't have cooked up a better scenario.
So the other reason I'm really bullish on him doing it in fewer games, and honestly, I'm kind of bullish on him doing it before the end of March. They have 9 more games remaining in the month. They get Anaheim tomorrow, LA, okay, tough one, but then San Jose on Saturday night. So that's their 3-game road trip through California. Then even next week, they get Detroit and Philly. Like you said, the hat trick, Frank. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he in one of those games has a hat trick and in another one has a multi-goal game. The other thing too, those are games they should win. Those are games where there could be an empty net situation, and he's not missing on those.
No, he's not. I think it's going to be so interesting. I was sitting the other day at the studio when I was in for Amazon Prime Coast to Coast, and Bruce Boudreau was there, and we were in the cafeteria just, shooting the shit. And one of the things that we talked about was I said, Spencer Carberry mentioned that Alex Ovechkin won't want to break the record on an empty net goal. And Bruce wasn't even sitting at our table, and he just was like, bullshit. He's like, he will score any which way possible. So I mean, again, we have no idea what it's going to look like. It'd be amazing. However it happens, the celebration might be even more epic as an empty netter. If that is the case, you might as well just end the game, run the timeout after that, and just have the game end early with, obviously Wayne Gretzky and the commissioner coming on the ice, a whole celebration. We got to break into national and regional TV games to see this record being broken. Honestly, we've had so many other things to talk about. I don't know that we've talked about it enough.
Yeah, Tommy is in. He says, hat trick is unrealistic and overly ambitious. Tommy, he's got 2 hat tricks already this year, and he's averaging a multi-goal game once every 9.6, 9.7 games. Like, come on, he's going to pick up another multi-goal game right away. And if you're someone who's sitting there, as we kind of, again, reset on what'll be a massive storyline post-deadline, if you're hoping he can do it on home ice, again, he needs 9 goals.
Got a good chance.
Yeah, so game number 9, Buffalo on the 30th is at home. Games 10 and 11 are on the road. Game number 12, which would be his final chance to break the record in fewer games, is at home against Chicago. So again, there are soft spots on the schedule here for Alex Ovechkin to do it. It would be quite something. Another just one more wrinkle. I'm excited to see what the secondary ticket market is for those 2 games if Ovi ends up being like 1 or 2 goals away. Because again, you'd imagine everyone in Washington wants to get themselves into that building. One more thing on the nightcap, Frank, as we look back at the weekend, and this does kind of tie into the trade deadline. The Detroit Red Wings are absolutely free falling right now. 5 straight losses. They didn't do basically anything at the deadline, because I'm not giving them credit for Mrazek and Craig Smith. They take on Ottawa tonight. Is it a hyperbole to say their season's on the line?
No, I don't think so. Not especially when you consider the opponent. And I think you're right. I'm fascinated by their deadline. What was Steve Yzerman into that ultimately didn't get across the finish line, if anything? And what does this say about his thought process and the belief of this team? How is it possible that a bunch of other teams found a way to improve their defense core and the Detroit Red Wings didn't? They sat by as division rival Toronto adds Brandon Carlo with multiple years left on his deal. I mean, I guess I can't bring up the Jake Wallman thing because they paid a second round pick to move him to Chicago or to San Jose, and San Jose gets a first round pick in return. I mean, it is unbelievable how poorly evaluated their talent has been on defense, which is the one big thing holding them back from the playoffs. They didn't need a Patrick Kane or Vladimir Tarasenko or pick another guy. The Red Wings needed to find a way to improve at the deadline, and they didn't, flat out.
Yeah, 3 points back of the Senators. Senators have a game in hand, a massive head-to-head matchup between those two tonight. You mentioned it'd be interesting to know what Yzerman was maybe close to or in the mix on that didn't end up happening. And let's go to a trade that didn't end up happening. Frank, a lot of the talk over the last 48 hours has been about Mitch Marner. At the end of our trade deadline show, you brought up the fact that he was involved in something with the Carolina Hurricanes. So I guess where I want to start is how close was this trade between the Leafs and the Canes? Like, was it simply if Marner would have said yes, the deal would have happened?
Yes, well, that's the case, but it never got really close because Marner was never willing to waive to go to the Carolina Hurricanes. I don't think he was willing to waive, period. But that was the question. That was the ask from the Carolina Hurricanes was send us Mitch Marner and we'll send you Mikko Rantanen. Simple as that.
So what does this mean then for Marner's long-term future in Toronto? We all saw Brad Treliving's comment saying, they're kind of on the same page or whatever. Are you buying or selling what Treliving's saying?
I'm selling. For one, here's, I brought this up last summer, and this was the consistent story that I told all summer long. You'll remember this because we had a million conversations about it. I said, if the Toronto Maple Leafs can find a trade that they like, then they will go to Mitch Marner and ask him if he's willing to waive. At no point during the offseason did Toronto get to a spot where they felt like they could make their team better via trade, so they never asked. And the whole time people are saying, Frank, you're an idiot. No chance they're going to trade Marner. You're making it up. It's all BS. Well, they finally got to a trade now that they thought would improve their team, bringing in Mikko Rantanen. And so they asked, and they asked multiple times. And by the way, Carolina called to ask about Marner before trading for Rantanen to begin with in January. So Mitch Marner, the Toronto Maple Leafs are willing to make things happen. They have to, I think, from a stylistic perspective, which is also then bringing us to the second part of this conversation, which is what does this mean for the future? You have two sides that are now publicly saying the same thing. You've got Mitch Marner saying, I would like to be a long-term Toronto Maple Leaf. I want to play for this team. And then you've got Brad Treliving over here saying, well, yeah, we want nothing more than Mitch Marner to be here for the long term. Okay, so if both those things are true, why are we not finding some deal to meet in the middle on? Is it really possible that the ask from the Marner camp is so outlandish that the Leafs can't wrap their brains around it? I can't imagine that there isn't common ground to find. So why isn't this getting done if that's the case? The only thing that I can come back to is the Toronto Maple Leafs want to hold the right to do things in a different direction or go in a different direction if they don't have playoff success again. They're going to have to do this year after year, banging your head against a cinder block wall. I don't know how many years we can say, oh, things are finally going to be different. And then they bring back the same team again to then not have any playoff success. So then people say, well, why is it that the Leafs would want to do that? Because they've got such a good player here. And obviously he's had a monster season. Well, because they haven't come more than 25% of the way to winning a Stanley Cup. That's the answer. So you need a different fit. You need a different style, whether that was with Rantanen and Marner, whether it was just with Rantanen, whatever the case may be. I think everyone recognized here that there was an opportunity to do something differently.
Selfishly, I love that we're getting a little bit of drama around this because with Rantanen extended, I want free agency to have a little bit of juice behind it. And Marner being an unrestricted free agent at the age of 27 would certainly do that. Let's go to let's go to the big trade that did happen, Frank. It snuck in right at the buzzer, but Brad Marchand doesn't just get dealt from the Boston Bruins. He goes to a division rival in the Florida Panthers. Marchand coming out today saying, there's no ill will towards Bruins management, but maybe take us behind what led to these two sides breaking up here. Was it Boston pushing, saying, hey, we got to get something for you? Or was it Marchand saying, I want to keep winning, and if that's not the priority here, I want to go somewhere else?
I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. The real breakdown here was in talks for an extension. Talking about a 3-year deal, the Bruins were just not willing to pay a number that the Marchand camp felt like was in range of market value. And so they end up in a spot where I think Boston also went to Brad Marchand and said, hey, look, you've got an opportunity to go somewhere if you want to win. And at the same time, we're going in a different direction as an organization. We've traded Brandon Carlo. We've traded Charlie Coyle. We've traded Trent Frederick. We've traded Justin Brazeau. A lot of guys out the door. You would be essentially a quarter of the team plus being the heartbeat of the team. They decided to change things up. And I don't think you can call it a full rebuild because any team that has a starting point of one of the best wingers in the game and David Pastrnak, one of the best defensemen in the game and Charlie McAvoy, and one of the best goalies in the game and Jeremy Swayman, you're never really going to be truly rebuilding, but retooling most specifically. And so the other part that the Bruins were asking themselves is, if we're going through this retool process, as valuable as Brad Marchand is to us, at age 37 and beyond, signing him to a multi-year deal, how does he fit with what we're trying to turn the page on moving forward? And what's the limit that we're willing to pay? I think in the end, they didn't really get close. And that leads to the conversation of, do you want to kind of stay here and obviously he's hurt and play it out, or would you like to go somewhere and have a chance to win? His choice was Florida, and that didn't leave them with much leverage to extract a return from the Panthers. It's a conditional second, which becomes a first-round pick in 2028, as far away as that sounds. It was like another planet from now. And he has to play 50% of the games, and the Panthers must win at least 2 rounds so they have to get to the conference final or it doesn't become a first. So not a ton of leverage for the Bruins, but they send him to a place that he wanted to go to, and they make good on that. And I just think in the end, the most surprising part to me is not just that Brad Marchand is standing at a podium today wearing another team's colors, as weird as that looked. It was also just that there wasn't common ground to find, that you would think that the gap wouldn't be that big that you couldn't find a way to bridge it. And that part is surprising to me.
Yeah. So I guess a couple of things that Bruins fans are wondering as they wake up here on Monday, March 10th. One, do you think there's any world where he's back there in the summer? And I guess 2, did the Bruins maybe make a mistake not opening up the market for him earlier? Or was that market open and it's just, the return is what the return is? And it is underwhelming, I think, just because they respected Marchand saying, I want to go to Florida.
Yeah, I think the return's underwhelming because they had the ability to trade him to 24 other teams. So by virtue of his contract, I mean, they could have sent him anywhere, but they wanted to honor his wishes. So that's why the return's underwhelming. But at the same time, rather than, and I know we say all the time, the job isn't to win press conferences here. And maybe he just said, look, please do whatever you can to trade me. We don't know the full details of the discussion. And perhaps that's why there's no ill will with management, because he got to where he wanted to get to. But I would have just tried to keep Brad Marchand and work through it in the summer and see if you can find a place to get there, because I think he means that much to the team. And I just think it's going to be that much harder for that team to get to a competitive place in the relatively near future without someone like him driving the bus. So I understand how everyone feels. Not a great place to for Marchand probably to feel, although he's got excitement now, but closing the door on a chapter like that, as long as it was. And I think Don Sweeney really hit it on the head when he explained his tenure. I mean, this is a guy that was a bottom 6 rat, so to speak, a pain in the ass to play against. And he became a bona fide superstar in the NHL with his play, hard work, maturity, evolved into a leader. All those things I can't say enough good things about Brad Marchand and how different his career is now compared to the guy that was repeatedly getting suspended and was nothing more than someone who licked someone on the face.
He did not have his first point per game season in the NHL, just to back up your point, until his 8th year in the league. And then he did it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 consecutive seasons. So from years 8 to 14, he was a point per game guy. It's a pretty cool stat. Let's continue along, Frank. Quickly, I want to ask you about a couple of other teams who were front and center at the deadline, mainly around the Mikko Rantanen stuff. But let's start with Rantanen's first team, the Colorado Avalanche. Chris McFarland, crazy busy, not just deadline period, but in the months leading up to it, getting Mackenzie Blackwood, the first Rantanen deal. Are the Avs, give me hot or cold on this take, are the Avs better today than they were when the puck dropped on opening night?
I think they are better. I think when you can go down the middle and you can go McKinnon, Nelson, Coyle, and even Jack Drury as your fourth line center, I think you're in a really good position. Their depth is a lot better. Marty Necas on the wing, Ryan Lindgren on the back end, Eric Johnson in a 6-7 role, plus completely changing out your tandem. I mean, if you think about it in those terms, the Colorado Avalanche basically changed out half of their roster during one season. It's an incredible amount of change. I'll say that they're better right now. I think the jury's still out whether they're better in the long term, because we'll talk to Stephen Ellis about this in a second, but I don't like the idea of giving up Cal Ritchie for a rental. And even if you're signing Brock Nelson, I don't like giving Cal Ritchie up for a 34-year-old Brock Nelson. I'll leave it at that. So right now in the short term, the Avs are better, but the flip side to that too is the Dallas Stars in your division are a lot better, and you've got a moose staring you down for the next 9 playoff runs in your own division.
So it'd be a little scary. 9 of the players on their 22-man roster were acquired via trade at some point throughout the season. So yeah, quite the roster overhaul. Let me ask you about Mikko Rantanen's other former team then, Frank, the Carolina Hurricanes. Same question. Hot or cold? Are they better than they were on opening night?
No, they're not. I don't think anyone in their right mind could argue that right at this exact juncture of their career that Logan Stankoven is better than Marty Necas. And so that's really kind of the comparison. Now, in the long haul, I think they will be better. I think Stankoven has lots of room to grow and opportunity. He plays a style of game that fits what Carolina is looking for. And in the end, they weren't going to be keeping Marty Necas. So they traded 1.5 years of Marty Necas in the end for Logan Stankoven, who's under team control, plus 2 first-round picks and 2 third-round picks. I think the long haul will be hugely beneficial for Carolina, but the fact that they went Necas, Rantanen, then Stankoven, I don't know how you could argue that they're better in the here and now, but let's take a step back and consider the way that they go about building their team. And Eric Tulsky had a great quote, which I tweeted over the weekend, about they want to be aggressive. They want to take risks. I give them full marks for taking those Rantanen risks. And in the end, they end up at a spot where the long haul will be better. And maybe with Necas to begin with at the start of the season, the Carolina Hurricanes weren't really a cup contender then either.
Yeah. I think that's fair. And I think some of the people who are being hard on Tulsky and the Canes, I think, again, big picture wise, they did the best that they could in all of this. They took a big swing, and instead of sitting there and doubling down on it, said, okay, if he's not going to sign here, let's go out and let's try to get something for him. And the something they got was very significant. So yeah, I applaud them for the bold swing. Like it's smart business. I think at every turn they made good moves. It just maybe doesn't help them win a Stanley Cup this year. But as you and Gregor talked about on the DFO rundown, it doesn't help them win a Stanley Cup by what? 1.5%, 2% in terms of their cup odds.
Yeah. And that's really what all these true deadline acquisitions change, is low single-digit % chances to win the cup. I mean, Dallas, according to Money Puck, and again, nothing is the Holy Grail or Holy Bible, but when you add a top 15 player in the world and your Stanley Cup odds only go up by 2.7%, what's everyone else doing just nibbling around the edges?
Yeah. Yeah. Ross Creek, I think, makes a good point. They got more than they would have from Necas next deadline. I think that's important to keep in mind.
Very true. And reminder that they only had in the summer when they were going to make the move for Natchez, they had 2 second-round picks on the table. So they basically traded if you think about it from that perspective, 3 second-round picks, if you want to view Natchez as 2 second-round picks, and the one they gave up, and Jack Drury for a trial run at solving their problem, getting a game breaker in Mikko Rantanen, which we criticized them to death for not having one of those guys. Then they go out and get him. Doesn't fit. He says that he doesn't want to stay, and then we're going to crush them on the back end of it too.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's get to our big segment for the day. It's brought to you by Tim Hortons. Canada, your favorite contest is back. Roll Up to Win is back at Tim Hortons, and that means you could win millions of amazing prizes with just the swipe of a thumb. Imagine turning your routine Tim's run into an unforgettable vacation with Sell-Off Vacation, a $1,000 racketing cash prize, or an all-new, all-electric 2025 Volkswagen ID Buzz. You only have till March 23rd, so play Roll Up to Win on the Tim's app now. Rules apply. Canada only. No purchase necessary. Visit the app for details. The next wave with our daily Faceoff prospect analyst, Stephen Ellis. Stephen, let's dig into some of the deals that were made on Friday that involved prospects. And I'll start with this one. Who is the best prospect moved at the deadline, and why was it Cal Ritchie?
Yeah, this is easy. This is a top 20 prospect in the NHL. And every year when I look at some prospects who could be on the move, you always think, like, how cool would it be if we got a top 20 prospect move, but you never expect it to happen. So to see that happen with Ritchie is very surprising. You look at the numbers this year, the start of the season of Colorado. You can also remember that Colorado was not a good team to start the year. He was having to play some roles that he probably wasn't totally comfortable with coming out at the start of the season. But this is a great two-way player who has at points this year looked a bit hot and cold, maybe not as dominant as some people would hope. But the one thing I'll say about him is this is probably one of the most adaptable players I've ever watched play hockey. And that's because he can go out there and score. Great. He's got a great shot. He knows how to work on that. A couple years ago, his draft season, he really needed to work on his defensive game. He dedicated the whole season to it, and it made him one of the best two-way players. So this is a guy I think who could be a top 6 center in the NHL. I think he's so smart, again, so adaptable, can play in so many different situations, and coaches seem to really like him because every time they need him to go play a different role than he might play, even the shift before, he gets it done. So Cal Ritchie, New York Islanders, you got a good one in them. And of course, I got to keep the trend. He's an Oakville, Ontario native.
Yeah, no doubt. Can't miss that. And you're going to see him in the New York Islanders lineup next season. Like, I think he's NHL ready. So they get an NHL ready player plus a first round pick. Pretty smooth move by Lou Lamoriello, who had told teams that were calling, you're not going to beat the offer I have on the table. And he was not kidding. So the Islanders get their top prospect. The Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that was interested in getting Brock Nelson, they end up trading Fraser Minten and Gulbenkian, if I can pronounce that correctly. What do you make of their moves? They had some really tough decisions to make. They only had maybe 4 or 5 quality assets to trade to make something happen. They end up moving 3 of them, 2 first-round picks, as well as Fraser Minten. What do you think of the way the Leafs managed this deadline relative to their overall prospect pipeline?
I liked it. And for me, I don't think there was a single prospect in the Leafs lineup that truly mattered for them in what they need to do. They need to start actually winning some playoff series. Fraser Minton's not making that happen this year. Easton Cowan's not making that happen. He's the one that stayed. And then Nikita Gulbenkian obviously isn't going to make that happen. So for me, it's like move out all the pieces of the farm. It does not matter. And Arun from the Leafs Nation did a really good article about that and saying, like, right now your focus is on winning the cup this season. And with Gulbenkian, I've liked a lot of what he has done this year. I think he's a good energy player. He really improved the last couple of years in the KHL. He was kind of this late bloomer, 5th round guy that not many people expected to have an NHL career, but to see him already play some games at the Leafs and be a good bottom 6 player, that's a promising sign. Fraser Minten, I'm thinking he's more of a 3rd-line player in the NHL, but he's a good one at that. He's really smart. He seems to make everyone around him better because he takes a lot of that defensive responsibility away from players and allows those guys to go out there and start shooting the puck. And I think it was Alex Nylander in particular played some of his best hockey in the NHL in the last couple of years, playing alongside Fraser Minten, and they've looked pretty good in the AHL together too. But Again, those are guys that are not helping you win now. You got to get those guys that are going to help you win now. Scott Laughton, Brandon Carlo, I think gets that done. And let's see if they can finally win more than one playoff series. I still don't trust it.
Yeah, it makes it easier, though, if you're the Leafs to give up those higher end pieces that you have, knowing that both those guys, Laughton and Carlo, are under contract, at least beyond this year, not rentals. Were there any under the radar names that were moved during the deadline period from a futures perspective that we should keep an eye on?
I'll give you two. One is Shane Lachance going to the New Jersey Devils, an Edmonton Oilers prospect. A guy
By the way, expected to sign, sources indicate, after his season's over at BU.
There you go. So I think this is a guy that years ago, no one really saw as a future NHL player, but the one thing we've seen him do in college is just be so difficult to play against. He's big. He could play with skilled guys. He could play on the power play. He can be that net front presence, and he's got the size. He's 6'5". He's having a very strong season at Boston University. Like, he's that prototypical fourth line guy, a guy that he's got the size, but he's not going to go out there and just hit guys. He's going to use that size to take the puck away from you, take that space away from you, but he's also very good defensively. So I like that there. And the other is Will Zellers going to the Boston Bruins, one of the best players in the USHL this year. You know, USHL's not, if you're a guy who's drafted the NHL and you're playing the USHL, it's not exactly the most impressive thing because a lot of the players in your age group are already playing college. But when it comes to him, he's been so productive at every single level, whether it be the USHL, whether it be prep school where he was just purely dominant last year. This is someone who just, when he gets the puck on his stick, things happen. So we'll see what happens through college. He's not big, but I think that skill there will at least make him into an NHL player. And for Boston, this is a team that didn't have a lot of good prospects. And adding him, adding Matt Wiener, adding Fraser Minton, I think has already made them a little more dangerous.
Two little fun things about Lachance. One, after he was drafted, he went to play 2 more years of junior before going to college, which gives you an indication of sort of how off the radar he was. That almost never happens, but it started the 4-year counter, which is why the Oilers ended up moving on from him, because that expires in August. He becomes a free agent. 2, he's the first sophomore captain in Boston University history since his grandfather, Jack Parker. There
Pretty
you go.
Cool. Steven, one more really, really quick. Artem Levshunov called up by the Blackhawks, or we're waiting to get his debut here soon. The number 2 overall pick from last year. What's he project to be? And do you think he's ready to make an impact at the NHL level?
I do. I was kind of hoping we'd see him a little earlier, but I think the thing with him is he's had to do a lot of moving the last couple of years. He goes from Belarus to the USHL to college to the AHL and now the NHL. That's a lot in a 4-year span, but every time he's taken on a new challenge, he just seems to have no issue catching up and playing the pace needed. So really impressive season in the AHL. He's put up some decent points there. 22 points in 50 games is impressive. I think he's got that size. He's got that smarts. He's got a really good personality. It seems like everyone loves playing with him. And now he's going to have an opportunity to go to a Blackhawks team where there's no expectations. This is just a, hey, let's see what happens. I think he's going to impress because he loves playing in the spotlight, and he never seems to disappoint every time I watch him. So I'm excited for him.
Good luck, sir. You get thrown into the deep end of the pool against the Colorado Avalanche tonight.
Ouch.
Yeah, that'll be tough. Steven, thanks for your time, man.
Yep. New mock draft tomorrow.
There you go. Frank, hashtag askdfo. This one comes in from Josh Frankel, who says, which division is the hardest after the deadline, the Atlantic or the Central? Frank, which one do you think is the tougher path out?
In terms of big boy hockey, it's a tough one because you got Rantanen and McKinnon on one end, and you've got Tkachuk and Bennett, and now Brad Marchand against some of the skill and high end of Tampa and Toronto. I'm going to say Atlantic, but by a narrow margin.
Yeah, it is. It's really, really close.
If we were to take all 6 of those teams that are in the playoffs from those 2 divisions and stack them up one on each other, would the Winnipeg Jets be 6 of 6? Hard to say with what they've done this season and in the standings, but would anyone pick the Jets to beat any of those teams?
So tough. The margins are so thin. They have 92 points on the year. Like, Connor Hellebuck is such a difference maker. You can talk about all the superstars on either side, but like, no one would have the ability to impact a series more than Hellebuck playing at his best.
Yeah, and Colorado also passed Minnesota this weekend in the standings.
Yeah, and don't look now, but Calgary, maybe they win that game in hand, and they're only 4 back of Minnie, and Minnie hasn't been playing good for a while now. You never know. Dustin Wolf, another shutout on Saturday. Let's go to our daily bets, brought to you by Bet365, where every nail-biting overtime win is a barn burner, every face-off, hat-trick, power play, shot on goal, penalty shot, and every suspenseful moment in between is amazing. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, an official partner of the NHL. Use the promo code NATION when you download the app. I'm looking at 2 superstars and 2 big favorites tonight. McKinnon 2 points and the Avs to cover the puck line against Chicago. McDavid 2 points, Edmonton to cover the puck line against Buffalo. You get a much better payout on the Edmonton side of things. They were sputtering for a bit, but got a big win on Saturday against Dallas. And you look at Buffalo, they are on a 3-game losing streak. On the other side, Chicago, they've been struggling for a while. Also just 3 wins in their last 10. Which superstar favorite combo, Frank, do you like more tonight?
I'm going to go with the Oilers against the Sabres. I just think Buffalo's got to be just mentally depleted.
Yeah.
But I thought that last week when you picked the Kraken over the Preds, and I thought that was a great spot, and the Preds won that game.
Yeah. Let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time, a little funny moment from the weekend, Frank. And hey, you can talk about, whether or not the players are defeated or whatever. You got a little Sharks fan here going, come on, take the money. And you gotta squint to see it. But during a video review, trying to make an impact as best you can, Frank. That's what a good fan does.
So good. Fresh bench just for the refs. They'll get you some post-game beers, but they weren't biting.
I just think it's so funny too. No one was fazed. Even the penalty box attendant didn't even seem to glance over.
Funny that they didn't swat him out of there. Like, come on, buddy.
Yeah, I know. All right, there you go. On that note, we will wrap up today's edition of the show. A little deadline breakdown. Big shout out to Stephen Ellis for swinging by as well. Everybody in the YouTube, you were fantastic. We'll be right back here tomorrow at noon Eastern. See you then. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.